The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Willow Creek, a suburban enclave where picket fences and pristine mailboxes screamed order. Marcus Hayes, a broad-shouldered man with deep brown skin, stood on his front porch, keys dangling from his hand. His police chief uniform adorned with polished badges gleamed faintly in the fading light. But the weight of his authority felt hollow as Karen Mitchell, a white woman from 3 houses down, stormed across his lawn, her face flushed with indignation. Her voice pierced the quiet street, sharp and accusing. "You don't belong here. Hand over those keys or I'm calling the cops." Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd moved to Willow Creek 6 months ago, hoping for a fresh start after years of climbing the ranks in a city police department. But the whispers had started almost immediately, neighbors eyeing him warily, their smiles thin and guarded. Karen had been the loudest, her complaints about suspicious activity thinly veiled. Now here she was demanding his house keys, convinced he was an intruder in his own home. The absurdity stung, but the humiliation burned deeper. He was the police chief, yet in this moment he was just a black man in a white neighborhood, his legitimacy questioned. Around them, curtains twitched. Neighbors peered out, some stepping onto their porches drawn by Karen's escalating tirade. "I've lived here for 15 years, she shouted, her blonde bob bouncing with each emphatic gesture. "I know everyone, and I know you don't own this house." Marcus's grip on the keys tightened his calm exterior, masking the storm inside. He wanted to shout back, to demand respect, but he knew the optics. One wrong move, and this could spiral into something uglier. He was outnumbered, out of place, and painfully aware that to them he was the outsider. Karen's accusations grew louder. Her logic twisted but delivered with unshakable confidence. "I saw you sneaking around the garage last week," she said, pointing a manicured finger. "You think we're stupid? You're probably squatting here." Her words carried the weight of a community's unspoken suspicions. To her, Marcus's presence was an anomaly, a threat to the neighborhood's pristine narrative. She pulled out her phone, dialing 911 with theatrical flourish. "Yes, hello, there's a man trespassing at 142 Willow Lane. He's refusing to leave and he's getting aggressive." Marcus's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, this is my house. I'm the police chief. You're making a mistake." His words were measured, but they only fueled her outrage. "Don't lie to me," she snapped, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. "You think you can intimidate me?" The neighbors murmured, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Some nodded along with Karen, their trust in her rooted in years of block parties and shared gossip. Others hesitated, sensing something off, but no one spoke up. Marcus stood alone, the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on him. The dispatcher's voice crackled through Karen's phone, calm and procedural. "Officers are on their way, ma'am. Can you describe the suspect?" Karen's description was swift, venomous black. Male, tall, wearing some kind of uniform, probably fake. He's holding keys and acting like he owns the place. Marcus's stomach churned. He knew the officers would recognize him. His department wasn't far, but that didn't erase the sting of being reduced to a suspect in front of his own home. The power dynamic was clear. Karen held the narrative, and he was at her mercy. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing silently. 2 officers, both white, stepped out, their expressions neutral, but their hands resting near their holsters. Karen rushed toward them, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "Thank God you're here. This man's been harassing me, refusing to leave." "He's dangerous." The officers glanced at Marcus, their eyes narrowing as they took in his uniform. Officer Daniels, the older of the two, raised a hand to calm Karen. "Ma'am, let's get the full story." "Chief Hayes, is that you?" Karen froze, her mouth half open. "Chief," she sputtered, her certainty wavering for the first time. Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, Officer Daniels. This is my property. I've got the deed inside if you need it." The younger officer, Reynolds, shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Daniels turned to Karen, his tone firm. "Ma'am, you're saying you called us on the police chief?" Karen's face reddened, but she doubled down. "I don't care who he says he is. He doesn't belong here. Check his ID, do your job." The neighbors' murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and disbelief. Marcus felt the weight of their scrutiny, but something inside him snapped. He was done playing defense. "You want proof," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. He reached into his pocket not for his ID, but for his phone. Let's settle this right now. He pulled up a photo of his closing documents, time-stamped and notarizando, and held it out for Daniels to see. This is my house. I bought it fair and square. And for the record, I've been dealing with your harassment, Ms. Mitchell, for months. Karen's eyes widened, but she wasn't ready to back down. That could be fake, she insisted, though her voice trembled. Anyone can edit a photo? The crowd's mood shifted, whispers turning to gasps. A teenage girl in the back phone, raised to record, called out, "Why don't you let him prove it? Karen, what's your problem?" The question hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. For the first time, Karen faltered, her confidence crumbling under the weight of public doubt. Marcus seized the moment. "You've been watching me since I moved in," he said, addressing Karen, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've called the HOA about my car, complained about my dog, and now this. You didn't even ask my name before deciding I don't belong." He turned to the crowd, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I'm your police chief. I've served this county for 20 years. But to some of you, I'm just a black man who needs to prove he's not a criminal." The silence was deafening. Daniels cleared his throat, stepping between Marcus and Karen. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step back. Chief Hayes has provided proof of residence. This call was unwarranted." Karen's face twisted, a mix of fury and humiliation. Unwarranted, he's the one causing trouble. But her words lacked conviction, drowned out by the crowd's shifting allegiance. Reynolds, the younger officer, spoke up, his voice tentative. "Chief, do you want to press charges for false reporting?" Marcus considered it, his eyes locked on Karen's. Part of him wanted her to face consequences, to feel the weight of her actions. But he saw the fear in her eyes, the dawning realization that she'd overplayed her hand. "No," he said finally, "but I want this on record, and I want an apology." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some nodding in approval, others staring at Karen expectantly. She stood frozen, her hands trembling, until Daniels prompted her. "Ma'am, you heard the chief." Karen's lips quivered, her defiance crumbling. I'm sorry," she muttered, barely audible. Marcus shook his head. Louder. "For everyone?" She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Chief Hayes. I was wrong." The words hung in the air, a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The crowd dispersed slowly, some neighbors approaching Marcus to offer awkward apologies, others slipping away ashamed of their silence. As the officers escorted Karen back to her house, Marcus stood on his porch, the key still in his hand. The adrenaline faded, leaving a quiet resolve. He'd won this battle, but the war against prejudice was far from over. Inside, he poured a glass of water, the cool liquid soothing his throat but not his heart. He thought of his daughter away at college, and how he'd tell her about this, not as a victim, but as a man who stood his ground. The next morning, a small group of neighbors knocked on his door, led by the teenage girl who'd spoken up. "We're sorry, Chief," she said, holding a homemade pie. "We should have said something sooner." Marcus smiled, accepting the gesture. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. He invited them in, determined to build bridges where walls had stood. Karen never approached him again, but he heard she'd started attending community meetings, listening more than she spoke. Marcus didn't know if she'd changed, but he hoped Willow Creek wasn't perfect. But it was his home, and he'd fight for his place in it. The incident lingered, a reminder of how far they still had to go. But it also sparked conversations on porches and group chats at the grocery store. People began to question their assumptions, to see Marcus not as an outsider, but as a neighbor, a leader, a man. What does it say about us when a police chief has to prove he belongs in his own home? When fear and bias speak louder than truth, if this story resonates, share it. Talk about it. Don't let anyone else face what Marcus did. Change starts with us. The end.